Earlier this month, the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals heard oral arguments in the appeal of Ohio death row prisoner Bomani Shakur, whose government name is Keith Lamar. Bomani is one of the 5 prisoners prosecuted as the Lucasville Five, targeted as ringleaders of the weeks-long prisoner uprising that occurred at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Ohio in 1993. If you do the math, you realize this is a 21-year-old legal battle so far. Bomani was identified, targeted, prosecuted, and condemned to death, strictly on the testimony of other prisoners. There existed no security footage, no DNA, no fingerprint evidence, only the accounts of other convicted felons who may or may not have had their own motives to lie, who may or may not have attributed their own criminal behavior to Bomani. And while hundreds of prisoners were involved in the uprising, investigators only collected statements, it seems, from less than 100 of them. So we must conclude that either hundreds of prisoners had no idea what occurred, suffering mass amnesia, or investigators simply chose not to take note of their accounts. Bomani himself has written extensively. His account was published last year, entitled Condemned. It's an excellent read, and is very revealing with regard to the tactics the state used in its frame-up of targeted prisoners in the aftermath of the riot. I sent my copy to Governor Wow, who never even had the courtesy to write me back and tell me what he thought of the book. What an ingrate. So anyway, the hearing. The reason this court hearing was so crucial is that the U.S. Court of Appeals would either decide to vacate Bomani's conviction or to set an execution date. Since the U.S. Supreme Court hears only 3% of cases, that means this was Bomani's last good shot at being heard. Bomani wasn't permitted to attend, of course, but more than 100 supporters packed the courtroom. His attorney, David Doughton, was also there, but Bomani and his attorney haven't been on speaking terms for quite some time. Imagine that, facing execution and being excluded from a hearing where your only hope is in someone who isn't speaking with you, to convince 3 judges who never met you that you shouldn't be strapped to a table and murdered. The panel hearing arguments was composed of 2 white conservatives appointed by Bush and 1 black centrist appointed by Clinton. Not exactly a dream for a black prisoner condemned in the death of a white guard, a conviction rubber-stamped by lower courts for 21 years. But, according to observer accounts, the arguments went incredibly well. Links to a report back and even the audio of the hearing can be accessed online. The principal argument presented by Bomani's attorney is the unfairness of the state withholding important evidence. In a process never previously employed in any other case, prosecutors at Bomani's trial gave his attorneys a list of prisoner names and a stack of anonymous statements. It was left to counsel to attempt to mix and match statements to the prisoners who made them, and then attempt to figure out which statements were credible and which ones impeached which. The judges even referred to this as a mix and match game, and asked the prosecutor why such a process was undertaken. The prosecutor could provide no coherent answer, and one judge followed up to clarify that not even the prosecutor could justify such a process, one that could only be, by design, an effort to confuse and obstruct Bomani's defense. Instead, the prosecutor intended to argue some kind of procedural minutia that Bomani's attorney shouldn't have filed something within a legal time frame because that time frame was going to change in the future. In other words, the court should ignore a deliberate injustice and murder an innocent man because his counsel didn't exercise psychic powers to anticipate a future change in court rule. So the real question before the Court of Appeals is whether the courts will turn a blind eye to prosecutors and prison officials scapegoating those they don't like, killing with a needle the fortunate few that the Darren Wilsons don't happen to shoot.
This call is originating from an Ohio correctional institution and may be recorded or monitored.
The real question is whether the United States will yet again become the murderer that Bomani is falsely accused of being. Free the Lucasville Five. Check out the links where this segment gets posted. This is Ohio Governor and exile-elect Sean Swain from Ohio Supermax facility. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at Sean Swain number 243-205 OSP 878 Coitsville-Hubbard Rd, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. To read some of Sean's writings and learn more about his case, check out seanswain.org. For more information about Bomani Shakur's appeal, check out lucasvillamnesty.org.